Hey everyone, if you could change one moment in this story, what would you change and why? Comment below. Now, on to the story. The mashed potatoes were still warm when my dad leaned back in his chair, wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, and fired the first shot. So, Sarah, you still driving that forklift, huh? Almost 40 and still lifting boxes? Darren snorted into his drink. Gotta admire the consistency. I didn't flinch. Just kept cutting my turkey into tiny pieces I didn't plan to eat. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. I'm Sarah Linwood. I'm 38 years old, born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I work as a forklift operator at a massive warehouse that ships goods all over the East Coast. My dad, Ron, is a retired machinist, old school, loud, and allergic to feelings. My brother, Darren, regional manager for a logistics company in Boston. Six figures, tailored shirts, new house with a two-car garage, and a golden retriever named Baxter. Darren just closed a multi-million-dollar contract last month, Dad said like he was announcing the second coming. That's real work. They always tag-teamed. I was just the halftime show they tolerated between compliments. I cleared the table while they clinked glasses. Later that night, my cousin Jenna FaceTimed the whole family to say she was getting married in Austin, Texas. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Road trip, family travels as family, which meant him, me, and Darren. 20 hours, one rental van, middle of August. I didn't argue. I never do. I packed my duffel, grabbed snacks, and climbed into the back seat behind Darren, who took the wheel like he was driving a damn tour bus. Dad rode shotgun, already talking about traffic patterns. By the time we hit Virginia, they were deep into mortgages and market trends. I tuned them out, watched pine trees blur past the window, while the air conditioning blasted too cold. Darren kept bragging about the new automated facility in Arkansas his company had just launched. It's the future, he said. No more muscle jobs, just data, coordination, efficiency. Dad beamed. Now that's real work. You ought to show your sister, give her a glimpse of how things actually run. Darren laughed. She'd get lost in 5 minutes. I didn't take the bait, just stared out at the endless highway. By nightfall on the second day, we'd hit Tennessee. The hotel beds were lumpy, and the free breakfast was all carbs. Still, I was glad for the break, until Darren turned and said, "We'll swing by the new Arkansas plant tomorrow. I want Dad to see it." Dad grinned. Damn right. Let's show her how things really get done. I forced a smile, grabbed my key, and shut the hotel room door behind me without saying a word. Next morning, we pulled off the highway into some small Arkansas town I'd never heard of. Strip malls, gas stations, a barbecue joint with a busted neon sign. Nothing special, until Darren sat up straighter and said, "There it is." A massive gray building rose behind a chain-link fence. The size of a football field, easy. Darren's company logo was already stamped above the bay doors, even though half the place was still under construction. He pulled into a side lot like he owned the place. "We're getting a private tour. Plant manager's a buddy of mine." I opened my mouth, but he was already dialing his phone. A few minutes later, a guy in a polo and work boots waved us through the gate. "Hey, man," he called to Darren. "Glad you could stop by." Dad followed right behind, grinning like he was 10 and about to see how candy gets made. I trailed them in. Inside, it smelled like dust and hot metal. Everything echoed. Robots zipped along tracks, lifting crates with mechanical arms and setting them down like they were made of glass. Orange safety cones and yellow caution tape cut across unfinished zones. Overhead, scaffolding reached into the rafters where sparks flew from welding torches. "This whole system," Darren said, waving his hand like a magician, "runs on predictive analytics, inventory, load balancing, even downtime. It's all automated." The plant manager added, "Once we're fully online, we'll only need a dozen people per shift. Efficiency through the roof." I kept walking behind them, staying out of the way of power cords and half-assembled machinery. Darren kept talking. "We've eliminated 70% of manual labor. No offense, Sarah." "None taken," I said flat. Dad laughed. "Now this is real work. Coordinating, managing, keeping the wheels turning, not just pushing pallets." I clenched my jaw. My hands were already curling into fists before I even realized. I wanted to ask if they knew what it took to run freight through a narrow aisle with an overloaded pallet rack and a busted back sensor. Wanted to explain that one wrong angle could crush someone's leg. But I didn't. We stepped onto a steel catwalk while Darren pointed at a row of towering racks. These bad boys sort based on weight and destination. One miscalibration, and you've got 10 tons off balance. That's why this tech matters. He glanced back at me. Wouldn't expect you to follow all that. I stared at him. I know what a misload can do. The plant manager chuckled like I'd told a joke. We crossed into another zone still under renovation. A few workers were installing new lift systems. Thick steel supports, fresh welds, exposed motors. You could feel the tension in the beams. The place hummed with power, sharp and raw. Once this gets certified, Darren said, we'll be running millions through here every week. I've got my name on the main logistics model. Boss said it's the best rollout this division's ever done. Dad clapped him on the back. Damn impressive, son. You always did think bigger than the rest of us. That one hit harder than it should have. Like I'd never even tried. I looked up at the overhead track system. Fast-moving carts, magnetized belts, tight curves with no room for error. They run live tests with people on the floor? I asked. Darren rolled his eyes. We've got protocols, Sarah. It's not a warehouse from the 70s. The plant manager added, all the heavy stuff's double secured during diagnostics, plus the techs monitor everything in real time. We walked past a pile of tools, and I heard someone yell something about a calibration check. Another guy waved it off. They moved on. I paused near one of the lift platforms, staring at the cables. One of the tension lines looked slack. Hey, I started, pointing. That's not... Darren didn't even stop. Relax. Let the engineers handle it. Dad turned to me, still smiling. Let the pros work, honey. Don't overthink it. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek and followed them through the next door, the echo of their boots and laughter bouncing off steel walls. They didn't get it. They never had. I didn't just drive a forklift. I operated inside a live wire of risk every damn day. But in their eyes, I was just along for the ride. We climbed a narrow metal stairwell to the control room. The walls were unfinished, insulation still showing in some spots. The floor vibrated faintly beneath our boots from the machinery below. Inside, a row of guys sat in front of giant screens, scanning data feeds and live video of the warehouse floor. You could see everything from up there. Crates rolling down the tracks, robotic lifts zipping between shelves, flashing lights on every corner. The plant manager pointed at the main screen. All operations are centralized here. Real-time diagnostics, alerts, auto shutoffs. Whole systems designed to self-correct before anything fails. God, I love this setup, Darren said. He leaned forward, tapping one of the monitors. See that? That's live tracking of all outbound loads by weight class. While he and the manager kept talking shop, I stepped closer to one of the side monitors. Something blinked on the corner of the screen, a red fault code, just for a second. Hey, I said, pointing. That just flashed red. You see that? Darren barely glanced. System flags all kinds of stuff. Probably a false alert. But what if it's not? You don't need to worry about that, Sarah, he said, his voice tight. This isn't a loading dock. I looked at the techs. None of them responded. Back on the floor, we passed through another sector with more scaffolding, active zones, and live equipment. Warning buzzers started pulsing low and steady. A robotic lift slowed mid-motion. One of the techs nearby said, We're recalibrating the main lift system. Should be back online in a few. I stopped walking. Why is it recalibrating during a live load? Darren waved it off. Sarah, relax. This isn't your little warehouse back in Scranton. There's redundancy built into every system here. Redundancy doesn't fix bad judgment. He turned to the plant manager. Let's move on. But I stayed put, eyes tracking a massive container overhead, one of those steel bulk crates used for high-volume shipping. It was rolling across the upper track system, but the alignment didn't look right. The base wasn't flush. That thing wasn't fully seated. Stop, I said. That load's off. It's wobbling. Darren turned, rolled his eyes. You think you know more than the engineers now? I pointed again. I know when a load's not locked. He exhaled loud. You've been watching too many action movies. This isn't going to fall on anyone. Then a sharp, loud crack echoed through the building. Everyone froze. The steel frame holding the upper section groaned under sudden weight shift. One of the motors sparked violently, sending a burst of light across the rafters. Shut it down, someone shouted. But nothing shut down. The floor crew below started yelling. A few workers ran toward the far wall. Others froze in place, looking up. The container tilted harder, just a few degrees, but enough to make the track above shudder. A bolt pinged loose and clattered to the floor like a warning shot. "I told you," I shouted. "That crate's unstable." A tech near us scrambled for his tablet. "We've got a load conflict in Sector C. It's not clearing. Recalibration failed." Darren's face went pale. "What the hell? Why isn't it switching to backup?" The plant manager grabbed his walkie. "Control to floor. Engage emergency stop now." Nothing. He shook the radio. "God damn thing's dead." More buzzers sounded. Another motor sparked. The overhead structure groaned again, louder. Down below, one of the robotic lifts stalled mid-motion under the swaying container. Two workers were trapped between pallets, looking for cover. And still, nobody pulled a switch. Nobody moved. I turned to Darren. "Where's the manual kill? You've got a fallback, right?" He didn't answer, just stared at the overhead rig like it might magically fix itself. I scanned the floor. The backup panel, old, rusted, tucked behind an unused maintenance bay, that's where I saw it earlier during the walkthrough. The control systems were failing. The workers down there weren't going to make it unless someone did something now. My eyes locked on the corner stairwell that led down toward the old catwalk system. I looked at Dad. "I need to get to that switch." He grabbed my arm. "You don't know what you're doing," but I yanked away. "I know exactly what I'm doing." I yanked free from Dad's grip and turned just in time to see the container drop. It slipped off the track like it had been greased, crashing down on the structure below with a deafening boom. Steel bent like wet paper. One of the side platforms gave out instantly, snapping under the weight and crumbling into a pile of twisted metal and busted pallets. The emergency siren blared so loud it rattled in my teeth. Red lights pulsed across the warehouse like we were inside a fire alarm. Smoke billowed from a busted junction box near the floor. Then, bang! Flames shot out sideways. "Fire! Get out of there!" someone yelled. Workers scattered in every direction. One guy tripped over a toolbox and vanished under falling scaffolding. Screams echoed off the walls. Alarms kept howling. I looked up. Another container was swinging on the second track, directly above the wreckage. It dangled by one bolt. Just one. The other side had already torn loose. If that thing dropped, it'd crush anyone beneath it. "Do something!" a tech shouted at the plant manager. But the guy was useless, shouting into his walkie like it was made of Legos. "Control! Respond! Floor's compromised! Where's my override?" Nothing but static. The fire suppression system didn't trigger. No foam, no water. Just thick smoke curling upward while flames chewed through exposed wires. Darren stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth open. No words, no action. Like someone had unplugged him. I backed up, scanning the wall near the old service bay. That's where I saw it. The emergency panel, faded red, covered in grime, obsolete to everyone but me. "I can shut it down," I said. Dad stepped in front of me again, coughing. "You'll get yourself killed. Let the engineers—" "There's no time." I shoved past him. "That second crate's coming down." I sprinted. My boots hit the floor hard. Smoke stung my throat. I dodged a pipe that had dropped across the walkway and ducked as sparks sprayed from overhead wires. A forklift was on its side, wheels still spinning. A woman was trying to drag a man out from underneath a collapsed rack. "Get clear!" I shouted. "Another crate's above you!" She looked up, screamed, and pulled harder. I didn't stop to help. I couldn't. That container was seconds from snapping loose. I reached the base of the old stairwell. The catwalk creaked as I grabbed the railing and climbed. It was rusted, brittle, probably not even rated for weight anymore. Didn't matter. I'd trained on worse. I took the steps two at a time, smoke curling around me, heat pressing in like a wall. Below, I heard Darren yelling something, but the noise was drowned out by alarms and chaos. Halfway up, a steel beam gave way behind me with a crack. A piece of scaffolding slammed to the ground where I'd just run. Too late to second guess. I reached the panel. The door was rusted shut. I jammed my fingers under the edge and pulled. Nothing. I looked down, saw a crowbar on the floor below. Took a breath, jumped down one level, landed hard. Grabbed the bar, scrambled back up. The second container groaned. The last bolt stretched like it was down to a thread. I jammed the crowbar in and pried with everything I had. Metal screeched. The door popped open. The switch was jammed halfway. Years of dust and rust clung to it. "Come on, come on!" I slammed the crowbar against the housing, wedged it under the switch, and yanked. Click. The overhead system shuddered. The dangling container jerked mid-swing, then froze. Everything stopped. Alarms died. Motors powered down. Even the flames hesitated like the air had been sucked out of the room. Below me, the floor was covered in debris, broken glass, and twisted shelves. But people were alive. One of the workers pulled his buddy out from under the wreckage. Another ran for the exit, coughing hard but moving. I stayed at the panel, chest heaving, soaked in sweat. My lungs burned. My arms felt like rubber. The red lights kept flashing, but the system was quiet now. I looked down at my hands, shaking. Then I looked across the warehouse, through the haze, and saw Darren standing with his hands on his head. His tie was hanging off his neck, crooked. The plant manager had dropped to his knees, holding the broken walkie, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. And Dad, he just stood there, still holding his cap. The second that container froze midair, I bolted. I jumped off the catwalk and landed hard. Knees rattled, but I didn't stop. Smoke curled low across the floor, thick and bitter. I coughed and ran through it, boots skidding on grease and shattered plastic. Pipes clanged down from above. One slammed into the concrete 10 feet to my right and cracked apart. Steam hissed from a broken valve. A worker crawled out from under a collapsed shelf, blood on his arm. "Please, someone help!" Another guy screamed from farther back, coughing his lungs out. I didn't have time to check on anyone yet. That second container was still hanging, bolt slipping, moaning like metal in pain. One more shift, and it had crashed straight through the floor. I charged across the open bay toward the far stairwell. "Sarah!" Darren's voice shrill now. "Where the hell is security? Shut it down!" I ignored him. Dad's voice cut through the smoke. "Get down from there!" Not a chance. I hit the first step of the rusted stairwell and took it fast. The old catwalk shook under my weight, groaning with every footfall. Welds cracked under my boots, but I kept moving. This was just like the drills we'd done back in Scranton when the top racks collapsed during peak season. Only difference? No hard hats, no trainers, no do-overs. This was real. Half the upper walkway had corroded through. I could see daylight between the seams. I sidestepped a hole and slammed my shoulder against the wall to steady myself. Below me, chaos still raged. The bolt groaned again, now whining with tension. I reached the panel, dusty, ancient, untouched. Tried to open it. Jammed shut. No give. "Come on," I growled. I dropped to the floor and reached under the cabinet. My fingers hit cold metal. Crowbar. Same one I'd used minutes earlier. I jammed it under the panel door and pried. The hinge squealed but cracked loose. Inside, the emergency kill switch looked like it hadn't been touched in 20 years. Rust crusted over the base. I gritted my teeth and slammed the crowbar into the rusted bracket. It gave way. Sparks flew. I grabbed the lever, braced my foot against the cabinet, and yanked with everything I had. Thunk! The entire warehouse groaned like it was breathing again. That second container, which had been tipping forward, shuddered mid-swing, then froze, perfectly suspended. Alarms died. Red lights still flashed, but the screaming started to quiet. Down below, one of the workers crawled across the wreckage and grabbed another guy by the arm, dragging him out from under a busted conveyor belt. Another team huddled in the corner, coughing and wide-eyed. Smoke slowly started to thin. I stayed at the panel, crouched, one hand still gripping the lever. My chest heaved, my arms shook. Sweat poured off me and stung my eyes. I could taste the metal in the air, mixed with burnt wiring and melted plastic. My heart pounded like it was trying to punch its way out of my ribs. Then I heard it. Boots on metal behind me. "Sarah!" Darren's voice again, closer now. I stood and turned. He was at the bottom of the stairs, jacket half off, face pale and soaked. "What the hell were you thinking? That rig could have crushed you." I looked down at him. That rig could have crushed them. He stared up at me, still not getting it. Behind him, the plant manager stumbled out from the haze, coughing into his sleeve. "Who pulled the manual?" Dad stepped forward, still holding his damn cap like he didn't know what else to do with his hands. "She did." Everyone turned to look at me. I stood tall, leaning one hand on the open panel, the other still holding the crowbar. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. A woman below pointed up. "That's her! She stopped it!" A few people clapped. Someone else broke down crying. The man who'd been dragged out of the wreckage held his side, looked up, and gave me a weak thumbs up. And for the first time since this trip started, nobody had anything smart to say about my job title. I just stood there, sweating, shaking, and still in one piece. But everything around me had changed. I barely had time to catch my breath before the fire crews came barreling in. Big guys in heavy suits kicked through the doors, hoses unspooling, shouting directions like they owned the place. Medics followed behind them, bags open, gloves on, moving fast from one injured worker to the next. The smoke was thinner now, but the damage was plain. Scaffolding twisted like vines. Metal support beams bent at angles they shouldn't bend. One guy with a busted leg lay on a stretcher near the wreckage. His face was covered in grime, but his eyes locked right on me. He pointed with a shaky hand. Her. She saved us. The woman on the catwalk. Heads turned. I stayed where I was, leaning against the control panel, chest still rising and falling. Darren stood off to the side, his tie loose and shirt half untucked, like he'd been spun in a dryer. He didn't say a word, didn't look at me either, just stared at the damage like someone stole something from him. A younger tech walked up, maybe mid-20s, eyes wide. Hey, what's your name? Sarah Linwood, I said, still catching my breath. Forklift operator, Scranton. He blinked. Wait, you're not management? I shook my head. Nope, just a warehouse grunt. That's when the clapping started. One guy, then two. Then it spread. A few were crying. Some just stood there, stunned, shaking their heads like they didn't know how to process any of it. A woman pushed through the crowd and hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. If you hadn't stopped that load, my brother'd be dead. He was right under it. I didn't know what to say, just gave her a quick squeeze and nodded. Another medic walked by and paused. You okay? Fine, I said. Little sore, but I'm good. He moved on, but not before giving me this weird, respectful nod like I was someone important. I looked over at the far end of the warehouse. Darren stood with the plant manager, both of them watching from a distance. The manager looked sick. Darren looked worse, like all the air had been knocked out of him, but he didn't want anyone to notice. He finally glanced up at me. Our eyes met for half a second, and then he looked away. He knew. Dad stood near the exit, holding his old baseball cap in both hands, twisting it like he didn't know what to do with them. He didn't speak, didn't come over, just stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Not in a bad way, not angry, just different. Like he had to rewrite something in his head. That look hit harder than any compliment he'd ever given Darren. I took a step toward him, then stopped. Let him come to terms with it on his own. This wasn't about him or Darren or their titles and offices and tailored shirts. This was about what actually mattered when everything went to hell. And in that moment, every single person in that building knew exactly who had stepped up. I didn't need to say it. I just stood there, sweat still dripping off my face, listening to the sirens fade, while a group of strangers treated me like someone worth clapping for. By the next morning, there were 3 news vans parked outside the plant gates. I stepped out of the hotel lobby and got hit with camera flashes. Reporters shoved mics in my face like I'd won a damn lottery. One of them read off a headline from her phone, "Warehouse worker prevents deadly collapse." I just blinked. I'm not giving interviews, I muttered, walking past. They followed anyway. Inside the plant lobby, someone had printed out a still shot from the security footage. Me at the panel, crowbar in hand, mid-action. Someone had scribbled, "Real hero," in Sharpie across the top. I shook my head and went to get coffee. 2 hours later, we were back on the road to Texas for Jenna's wedding. I didn't talk much. Neither did Darren. He kept checking his phone, muttering about PR fallout and damage control. Said his company had pulled all non-critical press statements until they finished the investigation. Dad just stared out the window, fingers laced over his stomach. Every once in a while, he'd glance at me, then look away. By the time we rolled up to the wedding venue in Austin, people were already talking. It was supposed to be Jenna's big day. Country barn, strings of white lights, BBQ catering, the whole Pinterest thing. But I hadn't even stepped all the way through the doors when someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole damn reception hall was clapping. Jenna's eyes widened as she ran up in her dress. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I saw the news." "Jesus, are you okay?" I gave her a quick hug. "I'm fine. You look amazing. It's your day, remember?" She smiled, but the crowd didn't back off. My cousin Eric raised his glass. To Sarah, who saved a warehouse full of people and still showed up for family. Everyone lifted their glasses. Even the DJ said something into the mic about me being a badass before switching to music. Darren tried to redirect. Yeah, we had some technical failures, but our system's undergoing upgrades. Nobody was listening. He trailed off, cleared his throat, and slipped back toward the bar. I caught Dad sitting in a corner near the back, still in his usual work boots and tan jacket, arms crossed, cap in his lap, staring straight ahead. Didn't clap, didn't smile, but he didn't look angry either, just still. I didn't need a speech from him. I'd stopped expecting one a long time ago. But that silence, it carried weight, like he didn't know what to say that wouldn't come out wrong. And for once, I was okay with that. My cousins hugged me. A couple old aunts cried when they shook my hand. One of Jenna's college friends asked if I'd take a picture with her for inspiration. Another asked if I'd been military. Nope, I said. Just a forklift operator. They looked at me like I'd told them I built rockets. The music kicked back in. People started dancing again, drinks clinking, kids running under tables. I stood by the edge of the dance floor sipping water, letting it all settle in. Kept it quiet, kept it chill, but something had shifted. Not loud, not flashy, just solid. Like the ground under my boots had finally stopped moving. When I got back to Scranton, the place looked exactly the same. Same cracked floors in the loading dock. Same busted vending machine in the break room with the out-of-order sign that had been hanging there since February. Same coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. But when I walked in, things were different. The hum of the machines didn't stop, but a few guys looked up from the floor as I passed. One nodded. Another actually clapped, just once, kind of awkward, then turned back to his scanner like nothing happened. My shift manager, Tony, met me at the door. "Hey," he said, sticking out his hand. "We saw the news. Proud of you, Linwood." I shook it. "Thanks." He leaned in a little. "Corporate's talking about giving you some kind of award. Don't know what it'll be. Probably a plaque or some safety poster nonsense. But still." I shrugged. "Don't need a plaque." "Yeah," he said, smirking. "But you earned one." Back by my locker, someone had slapped a neon green sticky note on the door. Hero status achieved. I snorted and peeled it off, but I didn't toss it. Just stuck it inside the locker door behind my extra gloves. Clocked in, grabbed my gear, and got back to it. Same crates, same scanner gun, same muscle memory. But the way people looked at me now? That was new. A couple of the new hires kept sneaking glances my way, like I'd grown a second head. One guy, tall, lanky, probably barely old enough to drink, came up while I was loading a double pallet. "Hey," he said. "You were in that warehouse in Arkansas, right?" "Yeah." "You, really shut it down yourself?" I nodded. "Emergency kill panel? Old one." He looked impressed. "Damn." He paused, then asked, "Would you show me how the emergency stuff works here?" I mean, if that ever happened again? I looked at him for a second. Kid was nervous, eager, not stupid. "Sure," I said. "We'll do a walkthrough after lunch. You ever seen the backup cutoff under the main junction box?" "No," he said quickly. "Yeah, that's a problem. I'll show you." He looked like I'd just handed him a secret key. We went back to work. Pallets came in, pallets went out. My back ached. My gloves were damp by the first hour. But everything moved like it was supposed to. Nobody asked for a speech. Nobody made a big deal. But there was a little more space when I walked through a doorway. A few more nods. Some people just said, "Hey," when they never used to before. Wasn't loud, wasn't showy, but it was respect. Real kind. The earned kind. And I wasn't about to waste it. A week later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and found Dad standing there with his old baseball cap clutched in both hands, like he didn't know what to do with them. His jacket was zipped all the way up, even though it wasn't that cold. "Hey," he said. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in slow, like each step took effort. I swear he looked 20 years older than he had back in Arkansas. Lines around his mouth deeper, eyes duller. We sat at the kitchen table. 2 chairs, old laminate top. Silence. He didn't look at me, just stared at the floor like it had something important to say. I didn't push. I never pushed with him. Finally, after what felt like a full shift of silence, he cleared his throat. "You did good, Sarah." That was it. No long speech. No apology for the way he'd talked down to me over the years. Just those 4 words. But coming from him, It hit like a goddamn truck. My throat went tight, but I kept my face neutral. Got up, poured him a mug of coffee. Black like he always took it. Set it in front of him. He nodded once, picked it up, and drank. No words after that. We sat there a while. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower started up. He finally stood, gave me a slow look, then walked to the door. I followed. No hug, no pat on the back. Just before stepping out, he paused, looked at the frame on the wall. Me in my work uniform. Hard hat crooked, grease on my cheek. One of the floor supervisors had taken it years ago. He didn't say anything, just looked at it a second longer than he needed to. Then he stepped out onto the porch. I walked with him, stood at the top of the steps while he adjusted his hat. The street was quiet, same cracked sidewalks, same rusted mailbox across the way. He gave me one last nod. Then he walked off down the street toward his truck. Didn't look back, didn't need to. I stayed there a minute, leaning against the porch rail, arms crossed, watching him go. And I knew something had shifted. Not loud, not sudden, but real. I didn't need him to say more. I'd been waiting my whole life for 4 simple words, and he finally gave them to me. Next morning, I clocked in like always. No confetti, no cameras, just the beep of my badge and the whir of forklifts already moving on the floor. Boxes needed shifting. Scanners kept glitching. One of the newbies nearly tipped a stack of dog food pallets trying to show off. I caught the edge before it toppled and grunted, "Use your back leg, not your ego." He laughed. "Yes, ma'am." But it wasn't about being in charge. Never was. It was about knowing what the hell you're doing when things go sideways. That morning, I tightened a loose bracket on my lift before I started, double-checked the tire pressure, and flagged a misloaded rack before it even left staging. Just regular stuff, but I did it sharper now, more tuned in. Truth was, nothing around me changed. Same job, same dirt under my nails, same concrete floor with that one crack by Bay 7 that still tried to trip me once a week. But I carried something different now. Not a medal, not a bonus. Just the kind of weight that lives in your gut. The kind that tells you, yeah, when it counted, you moved. That plant in Arkansas could have turned into a death trap. 20 people easy could have died. And I didn't hesitate. No title, no clipboard, no one barking orders in my ear. Just me. Boots, crowbar, and 30 pounds of muscle memory. I did what needed doing. So now, when someone calls me just a forklift driver, let them. Let them roll their eyes. Let them brag about their degrees and their management training and their office chairs that cost more than my paycheck. I know better now. Because when the system failed, the screens lit up, and the alarm screamed, those same people froze. The ones with the titles disappeared. The ones with the suits backed up. And the one who moved? The one who saw it coming and acted? That was me. I'm not just anything. I'm Sarah Linwood. And I stood up.